Hello and welcome to our Flip video lesson 1.01, Classically Different Ways of Life. And here you can find your Flip video recordings. Obviously the links are not there now, but if at any point in time you do need to rewatch the recordings or this video, you can always click on these links here. They will show in the PDF version of these slides. Learning objectives of this lesson: define oligarchy, describe important characteristics of life in Sparta, explain that Greece and Rome are referred to as classical civilizations, identify characteristics that pulled the Greek city-states together and those that drove them apart, compare and contrast government and values in Sparta and Athens, define democracy and describe why Athenian democracy was groundbreaking, identify democratic reformers and their accomplishments in Athens, identify key characteristics of life in Athens, and identify people who could and could not be citizens of Athens. So these couple here at the very end, basically from define democracy and describe why Athenian democracy was groundbreaking, from here down and a little bit up here, those are going to be kind of overlapping with 1.01 and 1.02, those two lessons. So you will see some of those objectives that you'll get more detail in 1.02. So just wanted to make sure that I note that. Table of contents: introduction and lesson extras. So we'll be going over that first. Then student guide questions. So we'll go over your student guide pages 265 to 268. And then important vocabulary. You'll need to make sure you understand this vocabulary. It will help you with your understanding of the lesson. And then your Human Odyssey reading pages 279 to 289. So we are at a new semester and a new unit. We're on classical Greece, as I just mentioned. So just to kind of start off the unit, the Greeks valued serious thought and individual effort, and the results were remarkable. The Greeks gave us philosophy, art, theater, and the concept of democracy. What made such accomplishments possible? Climate, terrain, war, individuals, and even diseases played a role. If any of these factors had been different, history might have taken another course. So we're going to kind of learn all about this during this unit. And so right here, if you take a look at this chart, I know it might be a little bit small on your screen, but I just put a picture in there, and that kind of helps to cover some of those objectives that I said we would be covering today and tomorrow. But basically 1.01, classically different ways of life, our introduction, or what we're going to be talking about for this lesson. In history, the term classical civilization refers to the civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome between about 500 BC and AD 500. A classical civilization is also timeless in that its ideas and institutions have continued to influence people over the centuries. In classical Greece society, two city-states stand out: Athens and Sparta. And there's a lot. There's Corinth. There's a lot more than just Athens and Sparta, but those are the two biggest ones that we typically study most in history. Their people shared language, religion, and great pride in being Greek. But in other ways, they could not have been more different. And again, we're going to learn about a little bit today, and then we're going to tie that in with the next lesson, 1.02. So you're going to go ahead and open your student guide to page 266, please. That's your student guide right up here. One quick note: as I said, we're on a new semester, but your student guide will say Unit 9, but this is actually Unit 1. So if you take a look at your student guide, I'll try and hold mine up to the camera here. I don't know if you can see it, but it says on there, Student Guide, Unit 9, Classical Greece. This is actually Unit 1. Again, this is a full year course, and so this would basically continue on with where we ended last semester. We ended on Unit 8, so this would continue on with Unit 9. But because we're on a new semester, it will start as Unit 1. So in your book, in your student guide, it may look as Unit 9, like 9.01, but in your OMS and for our lesson purposes, it's 1.01. Okay, so that will continue on through the semester. I'll remind you as we go, but I'm sure you'll catch right on. All right, so your student guide, page 266. So if you look at page 266 there, unifying characteristics and dividing characteristics. So characteristics that pulled the Greek city-states together, and then there's some that pulled them apart. And as always, if you ever need to pause this video to fill in your student guide, I encourage you to do that. So the arts, religion, and language. Homer's poetry, common language, and common religious beliefs brought them together. So those would be your three unifying characteristics. That question number, or I guess the first part is 1, 2, 3. Okay. And unifying means bringing together. And then culture and government. So different cultures within the city-states and loyalty to their city-state or their own polis pulled them apart. So those would be the dividing characteristics, or a few of them. And then also geography. Distance separated by mountains, vast lands, and sea pulled them apart. They pulled these different city-states apart because they couldn't, they weren't the same. They had different things going on, which related to their geography, and therefore that did pull them apart. That wasn't something that unified them or brought them together. And again, you can always pause the video if you need to. So your reading guide starts on page 267 in your student guide. Question number 1, how does the text define classical civilizations? And again, by what is meant by text is your Human Odyssey reading book. So how does that define classical civilizations? And you can, use your reading book to answer these questions. You can use this flip video to help you as well. The text defines classical civilizations as the civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome between 500 BC and AD 500. Classical also means timeless. For more than 2,000 years, Greek and Roman ideas and institutions have influenced people all over the world. Question number 2. In what areas of present-day life can you most easily see influences of Greek and Roman society? Language, arts, and entertainment, science, architecture, and government. All of those areas have influences of Greek and Roman societies. And you're going to learn that as we read through this unit about all of the things that Greeks and Romans have contributed to our present day life. Question number 3. Name 2 examples of Greek and Roman influence in the ideas surrounding the development of the United States. The balance of power in government, the motto E pluribus unum, and the architecture of many government buildings and memorials. If you ever have an opportunity to go to larger cities, you'll notice, or I would hope that you notice, some of the architecture. Some of the buildings are very modern, very, very modern in style, very kind of structured and straight. Some have a lot of influence or characteristics from classical times, those very unique columns. And we're going to study that later on in this unit, which is really interesting. It's a really, really interesting part of history, and how a lot of that architecture from classical times has transitioned over to modern times. Classical Greece, if you were to visit today. So this is kind of a picture of what it would look like if you were to tour Greece. The term classical, again, refers to the period between the Persian Wars and the beginning of the 5th century BC, and the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. And there's a link there if you want to look on the slides. It'll take you to a history page, which has a lot more information for you. Okay? So the next slide will be for the bottom of page 267. So what is classical? So if you look at the bottom of page 267, there's that question there. It talks about classical. What is classical? 11 possible reasons that history refers to Greece and Rome as classical civilizations. Question number 1, or 1, it shouldn't be question number 1. These aren't in any specific order. These are just 11 things. So I should say number 1. Ancient Greece and Rome existed between 500 BC and AD 500, but they still influence life today, particularly life in the West. So that's, the western part of the hemispheres, or the world. Many modern words and phrases come from the languages of Greece and Rome. People continue to tell stories such as the Iliad, the Odyssey, and many myths from these civilizations. Many modern cities are named after Greek and Roman cities. For example, Athens, Georgia, Syracuse, New York. Point number 5, again, these aren't in any order. Architects still design structures using Greek and Roman architectural styles. For example, the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. And again, this is where kind of was talking these bigger cities. You can see some of this architecture and this influence that Greeks and Romans have had. The work of Greek and Roman mathematics and scientists influence math and science today. So you can talk with your math and science teachers about that. Point number 7, again, no order. The planets have names of Roman origin. Point number 8, modern democracy has its roots in Greek and Roman political ideas. Point number 9, parts of our calendar, such as the use of AD, come from the Romans. The Senate and the legislative branch of the United States government is named for the Senate in ancient Rome. Point number 10, today's Olympics are based on the Olympics of classical Greece. And then point number 11, the Greeks introduced the idea that the world is orderly and that humans can figure out how it works. So you're going to learn more about that too in 7th grade as you move into the next course. Okay, so this is the chart on page 268. So this will take you a bit of time to fill in the chart. You can either fill it in as you're doing your reading, or you can pause this video and you can fill it in now. That's completely up to you, but it does need to be filled in. You're also going to notice there's a blank spot there in your student guide. Hang on, you can leave that blank. And then we're going to talk about that more in the next lesson in 1.02. So life issue, age at which most children leave home. Sparta, boys left at 7 if they've been allowed to live that long. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But Sparta was very strong and very, war driven. And if you weren't strong and if you weren't able to fight and you were a male, you didn't make it. So, there's more of that in your book, and we can talk more about that during class time. Gender roles, what do men do? What do women do? All boys were trained to be warriors. All girls were supposed to become mothers. Food supply, it was limited. Food supply was very limited, so it promoted stealing. They wanted them to steal. They wanted them to learn that kind of really nomadic, not even nomadic, barbaric way of life. They wanted them to learn that, hey, if you're hungry, you better go steal some food because you need to make do. So that was kind of the attitude that they promoted. Family living arrangements, men lived in barracks until age 30 and only visited their wives and children at certain times, not often at all. Citizenship was open to only males age 20 or older. Type of government, oligarchy was a rule by a small group. And then important values, brevity, toughness of mind and body, endurance of hardship, contempt for luxury, meaning they did not want them to have any desire for luxury. They had to be tough. They had to be tough in mind. They had to be strong, and they had to be able to endure hardship. And that was a very strong, strict way of life in ancient Sparta. All right, vocabulary is key to understanding comprehension. Oligarchy is a government in which a small group holds all the power. City-state is a city that, with its surrounding territory, forms an independent state. Acropolis is a citadel or fortified part of an ancient Greek city, typically built on a hill. The ancient citadel at Athens, containing the Parthenon and other notable buildings, mostly dating from the 5th century BC. And then culture, the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. Reading is key to understanding and comprehension. So your reading for this lesson is pages 279 to 289. So please make sure that you do have that complete. It's in your Human Odyssey book. And then our quote for today comes from the Harper Book of Quotations. The weak have one weapon, the errors of those who think they are strong. And that was said by George Biddulph. And here we come to the end of our flip video. The secret to your future is hidden in your daily routine. Always do your best. Thank you so much for joining me. Have an amazing day.